Step into the light where the wild ones roam, where the heart speaks loud, calling this place home. We break the rules, we paint the sky, ridiculously you, we were born to fly. Ooh, it's ridiculously you.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ridiculously You podcast, where we talk to people who have decided normal was wildly overrated and they have built lives that actually feel like their own life. Today's guest is proof that it is never too late to reinvent yourself, and she did it in ways that are super cool and more fun than a lot of people. Not that it's a competition, but you know, it sounds super fun to me. My soon-to-be hubby and I talk about like going places. We love thrifting. She's all into thrifting. And so I'm like, I love this conversation because we've talked about doing stuff like that. But at age 40, she found herself divorced with a daughter to raise, no traditional like job training, a whole lot of life staring her down. So what did she do? She took something most people overlook, which is like buying and selling random things, and turned it into two successful e-commerce businesses, some books, speaking gigs, podcast interviews, and even a TV opportunity. She has this like superpower of walking into what most people would call junk, spotting the one thing that's worth a bunch of money, getting that and selling it for awesome money. So now at 58, she is debt-free, writing her third book, starting a children's series, which is fun because like my last podcast I just did also wrote children's books. I'm like, oh, I'm seeing a theme. This is fun. And basically proving that reinvention doesn't come with an expiration date. So let's welcome Kira Hartley Klinger to the Ridiculously You podcast. I'm always like, woo, fanfare, yay!
Great introduction. I love it.
So
I love
I'm gonna
thrifting so much, not just for business, but for me. Thrifting that's my luxury there. My guilty
That's
pleasure.
so fun. My daughter and I, that's one of our favorite things to do is she just turned 21, and we love just like our favorite day is going out to different thrift stores and then getting like a little tea together. My soon-to-be hubby and I, we thrift a lot, so I'm like, oh my gosh, somebody else who's like a fellow thrifty, but like you actually make good money doing it. So how did you get into that? So take us back. You get divorced. You have a kid to raise. You're trying to figure stuff out. How did you even like come across this idea of turning these things into more money?
At the time, it was really the only thing I had to hang my hat on. I mean, my current side hustle, I was working the playground at the school, so
Yeah.
not really a sustainable job. I started buying and selling for fun. eBay was pretty new when I started. And I had this one friend, of all places, I met her in the cafeteria at the school because I started subbing in the cafeteria before I got hired to the playground, and I just clicked with her. I mean, she's just one of those people. And we just started going to Friday night auctions together at this one auction house. And it started out buying stuff for ourselves. But then things would come up really cheap, like this box of old antique eyeglasses, pieces, parts, some holes, some arms, some lenses, whatever. But it sold for like $3. And I'm like, what if anybody would even want that? And this was back when people like to bid on eBay, where you could put something out there with a starting bid of 99 cents and people would show up to bid. It's
Right.
not like that anymore,
No.
but it was then. And that box of glasses sold for like over $100. And I'm like, wow, okay.
Okay.
And this was before you could look anything up on your phone. We didn't have that technology yet when we were going to these sales. So the name of the game for me was cheap. So if nobody else wanted it and it was a couple bucks, it would be like, why not? And I'd take it home. And if it didn't sell, I'd be like, oh, it was a couple bucks, big deal. But I just started to develop this knack for buying and selling really off the wall things, the stuff that the collectors weren't chasing after, nobody really paid attention to. And it became really fun. And before long, my friend and I, we were going to Wednesday auctions over the summer. We just really had this thing going on. So when I got divorced, it's like, okay, well, I kind of know what I'm doing a little bit. if I did this full time and if I started going to auctions like all the time, because my job at the school was only 4 hours a day. So it's plenty of time to go to afternoon auctions and whatnot. If I did this all the time, could I make a living? Um, so it took a little while. It took me, I started on eBay, and it took me, I think, 8 years before I opened my Etsy shop. And that only happened because one of the really weird things that I found to buy and sell was fabric. And I didn't know there was a market for vintage and out of print fabric. I didn't know a whole
Mm.
lot about fabric. Again, it was cheap. I never financed anything in this journey. I worked with whatever was in my pocket. And if I flipped $2 into $100, well, that $100 went to the next auction with me. And it just kept getting reinvested and reinvested and reinvested.
Right.
Um, so yeah, so one thing that Etsy became for me, Etsy became my first store with inventory, like constant inventory, because when I was doing just eBay, and again, that's when people like to bid, it would have a limited run. I'd list it once, I'd list it twice. If nobody was interested, nobody was buying, I'd just get rid of it and I'd start all over. So it was constantly turning over my stock. But when I started to buy fabric and I started to collect it, it actually became a store. And I didn't expect that that was going to happen. But it did. And it just became obvious early on, once I started selling the fabric, that it needed its own space. It was getting too lost with everything else that was coming and going on eBay, and people
Yeah.
that were showing up just for the fabric. It was hard to navigate the site a little bit, and it just looked unpolished. It looked very unprofessional. I wanted to, yeah, be legit. So I opened a fabric shop on Etsy.
Fabric is one of those fascinating things. It is like my listeners probably do not know this. Selling fabric is actually what got me through 2020. Like as somebody who's like in speaking and I do like a lot of like live hosted events, all of that got canceled. And I had this little side hustle of fabric. And like in 2020, people were really looking for like home crafts as well. And so
And
like
making
fabric got
masks.
Yes, and making massive fabric like was off the charts big for like a couple of years, and we did really well. We
Mm-hmm.
we did some thrifting, and then we had like fun prints. Like we got it printed in China, like original designs, and then we'd bring it here because everyone's masks looked exactly the same, and they were wanting to do more interesting stuff. So we create. But anyway, like selling fabric, who knows about it? Like got us through 2020. It's
Yeah.
so weird, like the way these things show up in your life. But if you can catch something like that, the vintage stuff is really fascinating. Like people love a good vintage fabric. So give somebody an example. Like if you go and you're, where do you mostly thrift now? Is it mostly auctions? Do you do like yard or garage sales? We found a bunch on yard and garage sales.
I do. It always sounds so funny when I say do. I do garage sales.
Yeah.
But that's not mostly where I find fabric. I too have a little thrift store that I adore. It's a little Christian run thrift store. It's completely nonprofit. And every once in a while I'll go in there and somebody would have donated fabric, and it's always really cheap. So once in a while I go there every week just to make sure, see what they have. But yes, primarily I go to estate auctions and I look for
Hmm.
auctions that are selling collections from somebody who has passed on. I also, and this is funny, that all my books have subtitles on them. You have Fabric Wars, Tales of the Hunt for Vintage Fabric. Well, the third book, it's Fabric Wars, The Dead or the Better, and it's so incredibly tacky
I
that I
love
can't
that
not
so much.
I can't not go with it, because I have gone to estate auctions and I have cleaned house on fabric and sung happy songs all the way home. And I have gotten recommendations to buy fabric from somebody who's still living, and it's a
Uh-huh.
nightmare. There are
Yeah.
so many different reasons why it doesn't. I mean, I make it work, but it's just a completely different animal. It is so much better to buy from the dead. So that, little spoiler alert, the dead or the better is coming. But I really do like estate auctions a lot. And I was just on my computer this morning looking, where
Yeah.
can we go, because we're just starting spring here. And so the really good outside estate auctions should be starting soon. And yeah, I can't not be there. I can't not be the one that buys the fabric because I would ruin my image. I have to show up. They're expecting me.
They're expecting you at this
They're
point.
expecting me.
So you walk into an estate sale and it's somebody who is a crafter. A lot of times it's, like the kids or whoever that's, trying to take care of all of this. They're not into this stuff. They're like,
No.
why did mom have like 3 rooms full of fabric? And they just don't get it. So you get fabric for like how much, and how much are you selling it for? Like when you piece it out, like what's an average? What do you feel like you did well at when you're like, I got it for this much and I sold it for that. I am winning knife.
I have to look at my buying and selling as a collective thing.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I get my teeth kicked in on the fabric, and I pay more than I want to. But then sometimes I go to an estate sale where they didn't advertise the fabric, and I found the fabric in a boxcar in the backyard, and nobody else knew it was in there besides me. And I bought a dozen gigantic plastic totes of vintage fabric from the 1930s to the 1980s for $5 a tote. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
I can't get too excited about that because I have to average that in with the day I got my teeth kicked in. So I get really super, super, super excited if I can find the old stuff, like 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. That gets, I think personally, because I love that fabric so much. So that gets me really excited. But I also have a lot of people on my Etsy shop that love it as well. And so I think that makes it a little easier for me to part with it, because it's like, oh, I really want to keep this. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I just really, really love this. And then it's like, oh, but so-and-so is really going to go crazy for this too. So I know it's going to sell quickly. But say, for instance, I find the coveted, and I'm going to use this as an example because I just got one, the coveted 4-yard piece of 1940s floral fabric in the iconic rose pink and the turquoise and the lime green, all those wonderful iconic colors. And that came to me, it was in a big jumbled box full of fabric. If I spend on average $40 to $50 for a box of fabric, I'm pretty happy with that. But that one piece of fabric, I'm going to part it out, and I'm going to start by offering it in fat quarters, because there's a lot of people out there that don't want a big piece. So if they want a yard, they can order 4 fat quarters, and I'm happy to cut them a yard. But by doing this, I can get a little bit more on the smaller increments. But then on the other hand, I give them a 15% discount if they do buy a yard. So if you buy 4 of something, you'll get a discount. There's all these different discount levels, which gets people filling carts in a hurry. But that fat quarter, I'll probably sell it, depending on what print it is, anywhere from $6 to $8 for a fat quarter. So then, I'm realizing 4 times that for a yard, less than 15%, whatever. But if that one piece of fabric represents like 1 piece out of 50 that was in that box, I'm pretty happy with that. But I don't always find that era. Right now I find a lot of 1980s and 1990s, because the era of the people that grew up quilting in that area, the women that quilted in that era, those are the people that are passing on. So that's mostly what I see. And the older stuff happens when it's like a farm auction and her mother's things were in a trunk up in the attic, or, that sort of scenario. But, I had a woman, I do speaking gigs at quilting guilds. It was a way for me to get my books out there. It was a way for me to advertise my shop. Even though they don't buy much fabric, because they're the ones who have all the fabric. They're the ones that I stock. And the other day I had a gig and I opened up the conversation with, because somebody wanted to know, how do you find the estate sales? And I said, well, I look under listings, and if I find sewing machines listed, then I read the obituary to see if she belonged to a quilting guild. And everybody just started laughing, because it's true. It's like, they have more fabric than I do,
Yeah.
And there's some of the people that try to sell it to me. They're like, yeah, I don't want to buy yours, but do you want to buy mine? And then it's always, well, maybe, because again, we go back to buying from the living. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it's very addictive, and I do get very competitive.
Oh, that's fun. So when you got into this, did you know anything about fabric, or did you learn as you went?
I learned as I went. I did not know anything. I did not grow up in a sewing house. Yeah, but it's that way with everything that I've bought and sold. I went into this knowing nothing at all. It a hunch, a gut feeling about something, and the determination to make it work. But when the fabric was selling cheap, I have this thing in my brain that anytime you buy a quantity of anything, it is almost always a good investment. Because, by the time you piece it out, you know, yeah, like I bought a box of, oh my gosh, I don't even remember the count, over 1,000 vintage nail clippers one time. The kind that
Oh,
used to
wow.
sit, right? The kind that used to sit on a counter at an old time pharmacy. And you
Uh-huh.
buy them out of the wrapper for 39 cents or whatever it was. So yeah, this guy had 2 boxes full of them. And I think I paid $55. And I didn't know that there was this huge community of people out there that were missing their made in the USA vintage nail clippers until I started to sell them. And I'd get all these crazy emails about, oh my gosh, I have been missing my nail clippers ever since my wife divorced me and took them with her. These really outlandish stories. I mean,
Wild.
I think I made like $4,000 on clippers. But again, quantity, it took me a while. It wasn't overnight, but quantity of anything is almost always a good thing. So that's the belief I had when buying fabric.
Mm. So you'd buy like a big quantity of it and then piece it out. You're not selling that as I have 4 yards of this. I'm going to sell it as 4 yards. You're going to quarter that sucker down into little pieces and parts. So because people are
Yeah,
willing to pay a little bit more for a small piece too than
right. Because they don't
all
want the whole
together.
piece. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think is the biggest thing you've learned? You just talked about buying kind of in bulk and then piecing it out. Do you feel like that's the biggest thing you've learned about this buying and selling, or what do you think is?
Oh gosh. You have to really stay on top of trends. Things that were really hot and worth money when I started 20 some odd years ago are not now. Look at
Mm,
eBay. Beanie Babies started eBay. Nobody wants Beanie Babies anymore. Longaberger baskets used to be hot. Nobody wants those anymore. You have to stay current. And just because you find something at an auction that made you money 5 years ago, you still need to research it to make sure people still want it. I used to buy and sell the old pull down maps that they would have
hmm.
in the classrooms at school, but it was the old ones because in the 1990s, most schools replaced them with the paper version. Um,
Right.
but they had the paper covered cloth version before that. And so I would go to, in our area of Ohio, and I'm sure it's elsewhere too, the state would grant money to schools to rebuild.
Mm,
And so when they would rebuild, they would sell out the contents of the school. And one of the things that I would go to look for would be these maps. Another thing I used to buy were the old wooden PA speakers that hung on the wall. I would go and I'd buy and sell the whole building and bring a ladder, you know. Um, so the last, I used to do it fairly regularly, find these maps. And so it was a few here, a few there. This one opportunity came up for an auction, and one of my friends tipped me off about it because I didn't even notice it. It was 2 hours away. But it was a teacher that had the hindsight to save all the cloth maps from their entire school when they did the changeover. And then he had died. And so he had this huge pile of these pull down cloth maps. And I had to bid on them sight unseen because it was kind of last minute. I only knew I could see a picture, but you couldn't really see them opened up. Um, but there were hundreds. And so
oh, wow.
yeah. And so I had called the auctioneer, and, as you get to know the auctioneers, and I work really hard on being a favorite. It's important. So once in a while, you need to call in a favor. And I called up the auctioneer and I said, yeah, I'm so and so. You have this auction going on. I am unable to attend. However, you have these maps. And if you're willing to sell them as one group, because at auctions, they'll say choice out, right? They'll say, and they'll
Right.
take the highest bid for choice out. But for something like that, that's going to suck up a large quantity of their time. And they might get top dollar for the first 20 maps, and then they're going to be nickel and diming them the rest of the way down. So the
Mm-hmm.
key is to land in with the right absentee bid. And so I said, if you'll sell them as a whole group, I'll give you $600. And this was a long time ago, probably 10 years ago. And so they're like, all right, we'll write it down. We'll think about it, whatever. And so I thought about it after I hung up, and it's like, I don't think I went high enough. So I called him
Mm,
back. I'm like, okay, I'll do $800 if you sell them as a whole quantity. And the funny thing about this is that I was kind of on probation from auctions because I'd spent a lot lately and I had a lot to sell, and it was self probation, yes, but my husband was also giving me the side eye, and he's really supportive. So for him to give me the side eye, and I promised him we would do yard work that day. That's why I couldn't go. So
Yeah.
he didn't even know I was calling in this absentee bid, right? So, but I could not do it. It was the biggest lot I'd ever seen. So I got a call a few hours later, and they did honor my absentee bid, and I think they sold for just a little over $600, and they were mine. So I was glad I called back. But yeah, then I had to tell my husband, oh, by the way, I have to drive to Fort Wayne. I kind of bought some maps.
By some I mean 50.
Oh my gosh, there was probably 200 maps. There was
wow.
so many maps, and I had a friend that lived in Fort Wayne, and we met at Olive Garden, and she does what I do. And we stood out in the parking lot of Olive Garden, and I lifted up the back of my truck, and we're just pulling out maps. Oh my God, look at that one. You know, I had old maps of Paris and all these other different countries. I mean, it was incredible. I was selling maps. I think the most I got for one of them was maybe $300. The least I got for one of them was maybe $50, but a whole lot of in between. I made well over $10,000 on those maps. So it's just, yeah, but now the maps, nobody wants them anymore.
Oh, really? My earphones decided to die halfway through, but we're okay.
Now I can see your cute pink hair. But no, so that is one thing that I have learned, that you have to stay on top of the market. So I don't even chase down maps anymore, because like my husband likes to say, you saturated the market. And I probably did.
Yeah. So when you're looking at what's buying and selling right now, and if something's hot, like what kind of research do you do now? Because back when you got started, you didn't have internet and AI tools and all these things, but now you have access to all kinds of stuff. So now what does your research look like?
A lot of it is watching other people. And I kind of have an idea of what I'm going to buy when I go. But if there's something that comes up that I don't get for whatever reason, I want to know what it's worth. So I take a lot of notes, and then I come home and I look it up. Oftentimes when I buy things on a gut and I come home and I look it up, that sends me on a squirrel vision, and I start to see other things that are like it. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that was worth money. You know, I had no idea. So it's just a constant learning process. And then you kind of earmark it. I'm going to keep looking for that.
Because if somebody's new and they're like, man, I'm really interested in looking what that looks like, what would you recommend they do? Do they need to go to an auction, see what's people are really bidding on, check and see what it's worth online? You know, tell me a little bit about what you would recommend to somebody who's interested in doing to get started.
Going to auctions is definitely a great place to learn. Don't get caught up, and in my books, they're called the big bucks. Don't get caught up in what the big bucks are bidding on. A lot of the big bucks are buying for their own personal collections. So there's no profit to be made there. But even though I turn over quite a bit more money now than I did when I first started, I still look for the things that people don't want. There's a lot of hidden treasure in the things that people don't want. Yeah, and
so you're looking at what they don't want, not what everyone's necessarily fighting over. So you look at what they don't want, and then what do? Do you still go on kind of a hunch? Do you go and look it up online? What do you do then?
It's a little bit of both. It is kind of nice now that we do have smartphones. And anytime I go to an auction, people are on smartphones all over the place. You know, it's kind of has become the big cheat sheet to knowing whether or not something is worth money. Now, if you look something up on eBay, you can't go off of what people are asking for it. You know, you have to go off of what it actually sells for. And so that requires one more level of research. You have to click on the advanced feature, and you have to click on sold listings and then search again, because people are going to go fishing, and sometimes they get lucky and sometimes they don't. But people are going to stick big fat price tags on things and hope for that one buyer who will buy it.
Yeah, I recently sold a painting I have. We're actually kind of selling everything we have, and we're going to go move to Europe for a little while. But I had a painting, and I'm like, I know this is one of the pieces I have that's worth money. And we looked on eBay, and people were listing it for like $7,500. And I'm like, I'm part of several Facebook groups. I'm seeing what it's selling for there. It doesn't make sense. And I think it was just one of those, because when we looked to ones that had sold, it was more like $900 to $1,500. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I thought. But there was a couple that were listed super, super high. And I was like, how long has this been listed on here? What are things actually selling at? Because I don't think it would have sold very quickly at all if we had just tried to just leave it up for that much. But it sold in 5 minutes. So I'm like, maybe we should have listed it a little bit higher. But it sold very quick.
Yeah, those are bittersweet sales because you're like, oh, I'm so happy it sold. I made so much money. But then you're like, but maybe I didn't ask enough.
It's exactly where it was. It was exactly right in that spot. But we only have we're leaving the location we're at right now in 3-4 days. I think 3 days. And then we're going to be on the road. And so trying to ship something's really difficult. And so we were kind of on time crunch. And so it was we're going to blend the things we need right now. Had we had more time, I probably would have asked more, but it is what it is. But that is one of the things we learned on eBay is people list it for really high sometimes. And then, you have to look and see what it actually sold for. Cause it is a different land over there anymore. I actually hadn't been on eBay for years and years and years. Yeah. And so I'm like, oh, I guess that's where people sell things now. Are you ready to get into a quick lightning round so we can get to know you really, really fast? Okay.
All right.
Oh, this is a fun one. If your life were a thrift store item, what would it be? What would represent your life?
Oh my gosh. Honestly, it would have to be an old dictionary or an old encyclopedia. I mean, because it have to be an encyclopedia set because I've sold so many bizarre and different things. I'm not in one lane. I don't know, old road map. There's a lot of different roads in my life.
What's one thing you tell yourself when you're walking into an auction?
Don't spend over your limit.
That's so real. Weirdest thing you've ever sold?
Oh God, there's so many incredibly weird things. So this is something that I didn't technically have to buy, but I had placed an absentee bid for this auction. And so I had showed up that day to pick up everything that I had won. It was just me and the auctioneer. And as a parting word, he said to me, feel free to go out into the garage to all the things that have not sold and take anything you want because it's just going to get thrown away. Okay, I like free.
Yeah.
So one of the things that was out there was a large garbage bag that were full of the things that come out of women's top dresser drawers, nightgowns, underwear, slips. And there were about, I guess, 15 acceptable pairs of women's 1960s, 70s nylon granny panties. The ones that up to the...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, they're money makers. If you can find them new, more power to you. But I don't know if eBay still lets you sell the used ones. They might not. But when I found those, you could sell used women's granny panties. And so I made over $300 on that dozen pair of acceptable underwear that still had good elastic and things like that.
Oh my goodness. Who would have ever thought that?
Yeah.
Okay. So you started this kind of later in life, and I don't even think it's later. My tool that helps me get these things ready, it's later in life, it's after 40, and I'm like, I'm just about 50. That feels like we're calling us old. But at any rate,
we're timeless.
Exactly. So what's something that you're glad that you started later in life that just wouldn't have worked earlier in life?
Honestly, I think writing my books. I tried like the devil in my 20s and 30s, but it wasn't the lane of writing that I was meant to be in. And so I didn't publish the first book till I was 55, and it gave me a different appreciation for it, a different understanding of the market and the audience and how to self-promote, how to market, all these things that I learned from having a business and that I didn't understand before having a business.
I want to go into a little bit more depth in the books because we haven't covered that yet. Tell us a little bit more about the books because the titles are awesome. I love the ideas here, but tell our audience a little bit more about the books you've got.
As mentioned, I've always been a storyteller, so it had to come out somewhere. These estate sales can be borderline ridiculous. The auctioneers are hysterical. The competition can be maddening. And just the stories behind where things come from. I really started to relate to the Etsy community, and I started to write little essays on my listing pages about the sales, about the people. And they started to come to me in mass quantities and asking me to say, you really need to write a book. You know, they were hanging around my shop to read the stories. Yes, they were buying fabric, but they're like, I just hung around just to read the stories. So yeah, they came to me and said, write a book. And so I did. I wrote the first one, that published it at 55, and I wrote the second one, published that one about a year and a half later, and the third one is on the computer. I think that's going to be it. I think it's going to be a trilogy. I see this cute little box trilogy set on my shelf. So yeah, that's the goal.
And what kind of things are in the book? Tell us what's in there. Who should get these?
Anybody who likes buying and selling in any form, because yes, they're called fabric wars, and yes, it talks about auctions that I go to and buy fabric, but I also buy and sell a lot of other things. And sometimes I go to an auction and think there's fabric, but there's not, and then I have to buy something else, you know, make my money that way. So anybody who likes to buy and sell, anybody who likes to go thrifting, there's a lot of life lessons and life journey in there. You know, this whole thing of starting over at 40, and so just it's almost like a journal from the day that I started this. I think there are maybe 55 stories between the two of them.
You know what I find interesting too is, like, all of us that are out there selling stuff, and anyone who has a business, you have something you're selling, and we're all kind of taught to do this specific kind of copy that's like, this is their problem and this is why you want to sell it to them, and here's how you solve the problem, and that's how you write all of your sales copy. And you did like this whole different thing where you're like, let me tell you a story about it. Let me share with you an experience and create like a whole world for you to come into. And they were coming back just to hear more stories, to relate more to the whole experience. And I think there's something to be learned there, especially right now where so much is being written by AI and it starts to all sound exactly the same. I think, you know, sharing a story that's from your heart that you actually wrote, you know, I think that's a business lesson right now that everyone can take, that, you know, makes you more of a human. I think people are looking for a human connection right now that could be beautiful for anyone, no matter what you're out there in business doing.
I think you're right. And that's a huge business tip that I've shared before as well, is to stay human. You know, it's what people are looking for. If I get onto a listing that I'm interested in buying and I go down and read the description and I can tell that AI has written it and that there is nothing that is being told to me specifically about this item I am looking at, I move on. You know, I want to know more. And yeah, so it's so important. Yeah, it takes more time, but building a business takes time. Maintaining a business takes even longer, you know, keeping it alive.
It does. It absolutely does. So, Kira, where can people find more of you? Tell us where your Etsy shops and stuff are. Tell us what that is. Tell us where people can get your books. All of the links are going to be down below too, but tell us all about where we can find you more.
On Etsy, you can find me on Dot Oddity, weird name, DODODDITY. My Instagram page is also Dot Oddity. I do a lot of videos about fabric, things that I find, how to identify fabric, burn testing fabric, cleaning fabric. You know, I do all kinds of videos there. LinkedIn, I'm under Kira Hartley Klinger, and I have a Facebook author page under Kira Hartley Klinger. And the books are on Amazon, but you can also get them in my shop, and I can autograph them there. They're great gifts too for people that are hard to buy for, but people that are kind of in those lanes, the creative people, the people that like storytelling, you know.
Tell us the names of the books one more time, and when does the last one come out? The Deader the Better. I like that one.
Yeah, it's the Fabric Wars series, but it's Fabric Wars. If you look for it, add my name to the title Fabric Wars, because Amazon is so clog-packed with everything that has the word fabric in it that you're going to get everything but the book. So just put Fabric Wars. Even if you put Kira, Kira, the book will pop up. So it's Fabric Wars, and more. The last one is Fabric Wars Galore, and that's going to be the fun one, which is The Deader the Better. And that one I hope to have out by the end of the year, but I have a couple other hybrid book projects I'm working on right now, so I got to get those out.
That is amazing. Thank you, Kira, for sharing your story, for going out and being your ridiculous self, for getting out and, telling us more about this world of buying and selling, because I know that's a side hustle just about anyone can get into. It doesn't require like a ton of money. You can go into an auction and get something really cheap, or like even go into thrift stores and check stuff out and sell it for more. So it's something you can do at pretty much any price point, any entry point. And you gave some really fabulous tips for, how to get started and what that world actually looks like. I haven't spent nearly as much time in there as you have, but the little bit I have, man, we had a good time.
It's a lot of fun.
A good time. Yeah, and it's a fun community too. So, if that is something that interests you, or I think there's just great business lessons overall within that, go follow Kira, get her books, do all of the things. And as always, this has been Julie May and the Ridiculously You podcast. Share this with your friends, like it, connect with us some more, comment below what is the weirdest thing you've ever sold. I am curious about that as well. And with that, this has been Julie telling you to have a ridiculous day. Bye.
Share the spark, take it higher, hit subscribe, bring a friend, let the wildness never end.